Ian with eTrailer here, and today we're going to be installing the B&W Underbed Gooseneck hitch on our 2024 GMC Sierra. Let's go over a few features of it and then we'll take care of the install. The benefit of this underbed hitch is that if you were to remove this ball, you can use the B&W Companion. That's just going to be a drop-in fifth wheel option to be able to switch between if you have a couple of trailers. So the GMC Sierra is already known as a very capable vehicle, and we see it very commonly used for smaller towing capabilities. But to be able to branch out beyond that, I definitely would turn towards B&W for either a fifth wheel or gooseneck, and we're going to be installing this drop-in gooseneck here. Some benefits of that are not only going to be increasing your towing capability and what specifically you can tow, but you're also going to be able to retain all of your factory bed as a full, opposed to having some large fifth wheel in the way. So if you're going to be towing a gooseneck, I would definitely go towards this. And as I had mentioned, you are going to be able to retain the entire use of your bed thanks to these recessed safety chain loops. And then this ball is actually removable completely if you wanted to take it out, but you can also use the hitch to be able to store it when not in use. This does have a latching system that you can lock it in either position with it out and exposed or in this lower dropped in position as well. And when you're ready to use it, all you have to do is just grab this right here, pull up, the entire thing will flip over, and then you head back over to the driver wheel well in order to latch that. Here in the driver wheel well is where that latching system will be, so we just press the lever, it locks back into place, and we're ready to tow. When it comes to weight ratings for this particular hitch, for the 2 5/16 ball that we've got, for the towing capability, we're looking at 30,000 pounds. And then the pressure down on, so that tongue weight, if you will, is going to be 7,500 pounds. Of course, you will want to double check your Sierra's owner manual, see what the weight ratings are for your particular truck, and go with that lower number if it happens to be lower, just for safety. I'm going to walk you through the entire process when it comes to installing this underbed system and drilling through the bed here, which is going to be the most tedious and nerve-wracking part of it because we just want to make sure we've got that hole lined up. The rest of it is extremely heavy and it's very difficult to get the hardware all lined up once we've got everything in place. I'm going to walk you through that just like I said, but if you happen to watch the video and think to yourself, I don't want to try to tackle this, please check out our dealer locator on the website. We'd be happy to help you find a trained professional in your area that can get this installed for you. But for all those DIYers, let's go ahead and hop into it and I'll get you taken care of. We are going to be starting underneath the vehicle. We're going to remove the spare tire just so we've got more room to access things like the heat shield, and we're also going to be moving the exhaust out of the way. We do want to make sure that we've got our good safety iPro and anything else we may need to be under the vehicle. You also want to make sure that you've got a jack with you so that way if we need to lift up the back of the vehicle, we can do that from the hitch. So just things I wanted to mention. Start by getting that spare tire out of the way, and we're going to be coming to the heat shield right here. On that heat shield, we've got 6 13mm bolts that we'll need to remove. Just make sure you are holding on to this as you remove the last couple bolts so that way it doesn't come down on you, and the edges can be sharp, so do be careful. And we'll set that heat shield aside for reinstallation. Wanted to mention we're going to be going a little out of order compared to what the instructions have. Reason behind that is doing a few of these, we've seen that it's easier to have everything out of the way instead of just piecing it all together as far as removing the exhaust and getting that to where we can slide up into the frame rails that we're going to be needing to get into and then get that cross member across. So we're just going to continue to work through everything as far as removing what we need to. And this Y pipe going towards the driver's side is going to come completely off and out of the way, so that way we've got plenty of room to work. And there's going to be 2 13mm studs here that we need to take the nut off of. When you're taking those off, if they look pretty rusted, if you've been in the Midwest for a while, you'll see they're pretty corroded from salt or anything like that. Those, just spray them with some penetrant oil, let that soak in, and then remove the 13mm nut. keep an eye on that since we've got all of the hardware off there, because we're going to be coming to the exhaust hanger at the driver's side rear of the vehicle. We're going to be taking that loose, and there's a 15mm bolt to be able to do that. So this hanger is hung up by a tab, so as we remove it, we just want to make sure that it is staying in place, since that other side does not have any hardware. You could always leave a nut on one of those studs just to make sure it stays, but normally without unhooking here, all this should stay in place. As we remove this bolt, we will support the exhaust. We can grab down by the end with the studs and start to wiggle that loose there, pulling down away from the vehicle and then watching our end, and we'll set this piece of Y pipe to the side. We're going to be lowering the rest of the exhaust, keeping all of it intact while we're doing that, but we want to support it, so I'm going to take a ratchet strap or something like that, go on each side of the leaf springs, supporting up towards the muffler here. So when we take that loose, we can adjust this as need be to drop it down. On the passenger side exhaust hanger at the rear of the vehicle, there is another 15mm bolt we'll remove. And we'll swing that bracket out of the way for now. On the front side of our axle, there are 2 rubber isolators that we'll need to remove. I would suggest using a penetrant oil or just maybe some soapy water to lubricate those, and you can use a pry tool, or if you've got an exhaust hanger isolator tool, that will work as well. We've got the exhaust loose, but it is stuck on the fake exhaust tip here at the rear, so we're going to remove that, starting with a 10mm bolt at the top. So that 10mm on the outside, you can get it all the way to the end. It may stay stuck in there for now, which is fine. It's all still held in place and we don't need to worry about it. There are 2 10mm bolts on top of it as well that we'll need to access. So you can either come from the side here to get to those, or try to reach up in this pocket if you've got a good swivel head. Went ahead and removed the top one completely, and then the one closest to the inside of the truck, so that way we could just swing this and drop our exhaust down and out of the way. We'll just leave that tip hanging there loose and kind of drop down our strap, moving our exhaust away from where we're going to be working up in here. Putting quite a bit of pressure on the harness, and then I'm going to cut the zip ties completely where it's mounted to the bracket, just so that way we're not pulling too hard on that. We can just run some zip ties back through it at the end. Just going to make sure we're extra careful so we don't cut any wires in the harness. Heat shield that's right above our axle, and where we're going to be cutting that is right at where this cross member is going back behind it, going towards the front of the vehicle. So we just need to trim this down, so I'm going to grab some tin snips and start working my way across. We can come back and just clean up the cut once we've got it trimmed back enough, but we're just going to continue to work our way down. As I make these last couple cuts, we are going to be removing this entire piece going towards the front of the truck. As we cut that loose, we can trim all this back, bend it up into place, just whatever we can do to clean that up and make it look good again. Again, watch those really, really sharp edges, especially after you've cut everything out. It's going to be extremely, extremely sharp. So for now, we'll just bend that up. If we need to come back and clean that cut up with a file or something like that, we can do so. But let's work on getting the rest of this heat shield going towards the front of the bed out. Now here at the front of that heat shield that we cut, we're going to remove some T20 Torx bits. Should be 2 of them up here. They're going to be a little tight, but once we've got those loose, we'll go ahead and pull that whole section of the heat shield out and remove it completely. Now we can just throw this away. Now we've got a couple more brackets that are going to be coming loose. We're going to start with our brake line bracket on the driver's side here. We've got two 13mm bolts that will come out. And we can let that bracket just hang for now. So here on top of the bracket, almost dead center in front of our axle, we're going to be looking at two 10mm nuts that we need to remove to get this loose. So a long extension and a V-well socket. First one's going to be in the middle here. So I've got the middle one removed and they're going to look like this. There is one more on the passenger, towards the passenger side of that bracket, so we'll need to take that loose as well. That one the rest of the way off. And then the bracket you can just push up on. It's going to have a little bit of adhesion to the underbed coating, so we'll just keep rocking this back and forth and slide it towards the driver's side of the vehicle. And that should pull completely off. I wanted to show the little studs, so that's why we push it towards the driver's side, is it's going to have those little locking tabs. Come out from underneath the vehicle, and we're going to come to the wheel wells here. There's going to be a set of 3 T15 Torx head bolts that need to come out. We're going to be flipping this entire wheel liner up out of the way to slide the rails through. So we'll just take those loose. It can be a little tight, so like I'd mentioned before, if you wanted to use a jack, you can always put that at the hitch, lift the back of the vehicle up to make it easier to access the one here in the middle. Now we'll grab that fender liner and pull it up over the wheel here. We're just trying to access underneath between that frame and the bed. And we are going to be doing this on both sides, so I've shown this here on the passenger side, exact same procedure over on that driver's side. Now hopping back underneath the vehicle, we got a couple more things we just need to button up before we can slide those rails into place. So right above the bump stops, we've got our first bracket that needs to be taken off that's holding the looming in place on the passenger side. So just go above that bump stop, use either a flat head or, like I'm using a push pin removal tool here, pry that away from the frame. And once we got that away from the frame, we'll just kind of pull that down out of the way for now. If we need to, we can take more loose, but we'll just have those two right above the bump stop and the shock hanger on that passenger side. Now for the really fun part of this one, cutting through the bed. And to be able to do so, we're going to use the measurements shown in the instruction manual while adding 1/8 of an inch for our spray-in bed liner that we've got here. So I've got that marked out to the length that it talks about in that instruction manual. And then for our center point, what we're going to do is go from wheel well to wheel well, making sure we stay in the exact same point when it comes to our edging. And we'll find the halfway point on our measurement. Once we've got that halfway point, we can make our mark. So we're looking to be in that center rail area. Just make sure, again, that you're compensating if you do have a spray-in bed liner. If you don't need to add that 1/8 of an inch or 1/16 of an inch, depending on how thick that bed liner is. You'll just do the measurement shown in the instructions. And once we've got that marked, we're going to take a pilot bit. I already went under and double checked that we've got everything out of the way underneath, so that way we're not going to hit any lines or fuel tank or anything like that. So we're not going to go very far with the pilot hole at first, making sure we stay centered, and take your time with it because we don't want this hole to be in the wrong spot. One thing I would suggest, even as we just get this pilot hole going, is having a shop vac handy to be able to clean up any debris. We just wouldn't want any of that extra metal or any of that causing any damage or getting stuck in the bed. Now, one thing we've made, since we do quite a few of these, but it's something you could make at home as well, just take a nice thick flat piece of wood and you can make a template. It's going to help keep that hole saw centered where we're going to want to be. That way we can stand on it just like this, and as we're drilling down, it doesn't have the ability to walk left or right or up or down or anything like that. So we'll get this centered using that pilot bit inside to line up. And we'll go ahead and use that 4-inch hole saw to cut out the hole. Now I'm going to come back with a round edge file and just clean up all the burrs off of the edges of the hole. Now I'm going to come back with either some spray paint if we were going to tape it off, but in my case I'm just going to be using a paint pen, get all those metal edges covered back up with paint. That way we don't cause any premature rust or corrosion here in the bed. Now this is where we're going to come to the rear of the vehicle, and I had talked earlier about having a jack ready to be able to go from the hitch. Now is going to be a good time to go ahead and raise that up. What we're looking for is some more space in the wheel well, and I'm going to show you exactly why in here in just one moment. So I'm going to show you from here underneath. We've got the tire pretty much lined up with where we need to be on the frame rail. We're going to be sneaking up in the front of where this cross member is, so we just want to make sure we've got enough room there, and that was the reason I mentioned that jack. So we'll continue to raise this up until we can slide the front cross member in that area. Take that front cross member, that's going to be the piece of angle iron with the holes in it, and we're going to be moving that in between the frame and the bottom of the bed there, but you want to make sure the divot is going to be on the side that's on the driver's side, and we're pushing from the passenger side to the driver's side. It can come the other way if that's easier for you, but that's just how we're going to be showing it today. So I'm going to take that end and slide it right into the channel in between our frame and the bed. Now we'll hop underneath the vehicle here and start working that across. And we're going to go all the way until the driver's side is resting there on the frame, and then we can scoot this back till we're making contact with the shock on that passenger side there. Then on the driver's side, we can just kind of have that hang on the frame rail up out of the way. So now we'll need to take one of the bolts. It's just going to be the hex cap here, and then the rubber washer that comes along with that. And on the driver's side, we've got that first hole at the beginning of the divot. We're going to be feeding that through the bottom of the rail and then adding the rubber washer to keep that in place. So run that all the way down to the rail there. Then we can grab the rail and flip that up and vertical. And we'll just slide this as far forward, kind of using our shock mount as our holding point to keep that in place while we get the center up. Now when we remove the hardware for our wheel well liners, there are some little tabs that those screws went into. We're going to have to remove those for now, just so that way the rail sits as far forward as we can get it to go. So for those, you can either pinch the back of them or just get a flat head under the front edge and they can be pried out. And you can take a pair of needle nose on the back side of them if you could squeeze in there. Sometimes a long set of needle nose will do the trick. Just get on the back side of it and give it a squeeze. And as you squeeze, it should just pop right out. Just to be able to show those a little better and what I was grabbing onto on the back side. So this would be where you're seeing from in the wheel well. That back side can just be pinched down, and that's when those will come out. And once you got the passenger one out, hop over to the driver's side and get that same exact clip out. Now we're ready to use the fish wires that come along with the kit. We're also going to grab one of the carriage bolts, one of the plates that's going to be along with that carriage bolt, and you see it's got a square hole, and that's going to be sitting there to lock that into the frame and give us something to tighten up against. Additionally, we're going to need one of the oval washers and then one of these locking plates that's going to feed onto the threading of our bolt. So on both sides of the frame rail, directly above our bump stop, you're going to find there's an oval hole there. We're going to come to the inside of the frame rail, and then we're going to feed that fish wire through the oval hole on the outside of the rail towards the inside and pull that coil down. With that coil exposed, we can take our plate to start, feed that fish wire through it, and then thread on the carriage bolt. Now with that bolt threaded onto the coil, we can start to pull that fish wire through, starting with our plate. So force that plate up into the frame. Once we've got that plate through, continue to pull on the fish wire, feed the bolt through the back. And just wiggle that around until the plate and the bolt meet. And that'll allow the bolt to come out towards the wheel. And once we've got that there, take your oval spacer, feed that up over the fish wire. And all the way to our bolt. Push that over the threading all the way to the end. And then we'll take our locking plate. And what you'll want to do is reach up inside of the hole on the inside of the frame rail, hold that head of the bolt still, and unspool the coil wire. Use that locking plate almost as a nut and thread that on, going towards the inside of the frame here. We're going to make sure that little oval washer sits down inside, so you may have to kind of adjust up or down or left or right. We're going to snug by hand our locking plate. Just make sure you're putting pressure on the inside of that frame where the bolt's sitting, so that way the bolt and the plate don't drop down into the frame and you don't have to try to fish those out with a magnet. Now to help identify our brackets, because we are going to be putting these on the outside of the frame rail using that bolt that we just installed into the frame rail, I wanted to talk about how to identify left and right. So on our passenger side here, we're going to have the one that just has the regular B&W trailer hitches sticker, and the dovetail on that is going to be headed back towards the rear of the vehicle. And same situation here for the driver one, but easier to identify because we've got a different type of sticker, and it's going to show the operation of the handle. So this one's going to be going on the driver's side, and I wanted to talk about the two holes that are on each of these. These larger holes are going to be for a bolt that's coming through for the sway bar. So you want to make sure that is lined up, and then the bolt that we put into the frame rail is going to go in these back holes on the dovetail. Now pushing the bracket up into place, you want to angle it with the head going underneath this lip where the bed is. And we'll line that up with our L bracket that we've got in there already for that front bracket, and you may have to adjust that slightly in order to get it to sit correctly. And over the bolt, we're going to add a flat washer, a split washer, and then the nut. And we're just hand tightening these for now just to hold everything in place. Repeat that same process over on the driver's side. Now with our hardware holding up those brackets, we can turn our attention to the U-bolts that are going to come with the kit. And those are going to go up over the frame. We just want to make sure we're not pinching any lines or anything like that. So here on the passenger side, just avoid that harness that we've got in the way. You may have to push up on the bracket to get it to line up, but we'll feed that through the two holes meant for that. So once you've got the U-bolt in place, it's going to seem like it's pretty angled, and it will be for now. We're just, again, leaving everything hand tight, but we're going to follow up with the exact same hardware that we used on the bolt back there with that flat washer, the split washer, and then a nut on both of the ends. Here at the driver's side, we're lined up at the rear of the gas tank. We've just got a few more things that we need to avoid, so we want to make sure we go under the wiring for that sway control and then go under those brake lines of the bracket that we took loose. Now I did use a poppet tool. You could use a flathead. I've just taken the wiring loose so that way I know for sure I'm going to be able to get the bracket lined up with our U-bolt. So we're going to be putting up the center of the gooseneck next, but I did want to address the rearmost frame rail that we're going to be using. It does have some threaded holes all the way down it, and with the good powder coating that B&W uses, that will get down into the holes. So best suggestion is going to be is to take one of the bolts that's going to be living in that and run that down. It's going to be a 19 millimeter, so make sure we knock all of that powder coating on the inside of the threading loose before we go to put this in place. Now we can take the center part of our hitch here, and that's going to go with the handle side, and that's going to be the spring set on the driver's side, and we're lifting that up above the exhaust and up onto the gas tank. Just make sure you're paying attention to all the plastic lines and everything like that, and we'll just rest that up there for now. Now for the rear rail, you're going to notice that the bolt holes are a little offset. When we put that in, it's going to go in just like this with the bolt holes more towards the top instead of them being towards the bottom. So just make sure that bigger space is lower, and we're going to do exactly like we did with the other frame rail and come over to our wheel well and push that through. So I've started pushing that through. I just kind of wanted to show the path. We're going to be in front of the bed rail that's directly lined up with where else we're going to be putting the hitch. So again, just push that through. You may have to add some more room to the jack because here towards the rear of the vehicle, the wheel is going to be a little bit higher and it makes it a little more difficult to push that through. But just double check you're not going to hit anything as you're going across, and continue to push that over to the other frame rail. So I've got a couple straps here, and we're going to be pulling the hitch up flush with the bed. So just use the hook that's going to be what holds the gooseneck ball in place as your anchor point, and then just a couple straps tightening up back and forth. We'll be able to pull that plate up into the hole here. So I did end up using a ratchet strap just to help get that pulled up the rest of the way, and then I've got a second strap on there just so that way if this one did happen to fail, we'll be okay and it won't fall down on us while we're underneath. Just making sure that's nice and tight. We've got it up against the bed like it should be, so now we just need to hop back underneath. Now we're going to start lining up all the hardware between our frame rails to get that center part in place. Again, we're just making sure that it's nice and tight up against the bed. We're going to start with the one that was over the gas tank that we put the O-ring on, just because it's going to be one of the harder ones to reach. And temporarily for that bolt, we're going to use the nut to draw it closer to the rail. You're going to find it may be a little bit short just because we're working in limited space here, and that bolt isn't really supported by anything in the back. So that'll just draw that closer and kind of help us start to get lined up. Now for all of our other spots, we're going to do the same type of situation. We need to get our holes lined up and then feed the bolt towards the rear of the vehicle, towards the center of our hitch, and then we'll repeat the same process with the flat washer, lock washer, and then the nut on top of that. So just start with the frontmost rail, get all those lined up, and then we'll talk about that rearmost rail. Now on the outside of our frame rails, we're going to end up with almost the exact same hardware minus the flat washers and one less nut than we've been using. So you'll still need the 2 lock washers and 2 bolts. So for the rearmost frame rail, it's just going to be the bolt and a lock washer threading directly into the rail. And then at the front, we're going to use the bolt like we did on the inside of our hitch and go through the back, and then use a lock washer on this side along with a nut. So it's the only difference in the hardware compared to what we were doing down there, where these flat washers were used as well. So lining those up is going to be pretty tricky, and you're just going to have to work really, really slow at it. The best thing to do is just take your time. If you can get one side, do that first, and then hop over and get the other side. Now we're ready to come back with a 19mm socket and then a box-in wrench as well for those front rail ones. We're going to just tighten everything up, snug it all down, but we do want to make sure as we're doing that we're still square with our end that's coming up through the bed and squared down below. There's going to be some instructions in those written instructions of how to find the measurements for proper square. Now going back through with a torque wrench, we're going to do the same exact pattern we did, just starting on the inside here and working our way out. Again, double check your measurements, make sure you're square, because we don't have to take all this loose to re-square it back up. If you do not have a torque wrench, you can pick one up along with your order for your gooseneck that you're going to be picking up, or you could head down to that local parts store and they'll be able to rent one out to you. Now they're going to be all pretty difficult to get to with that torque wrench, so just take your time and go one by one. The torque specs are going to be listed in the paper instructions you'll receive with your hitch. Now with all that torqued, we can come back up top here and get all these ratchet straps off of there. We're going to be drilling from the bottom upwards for a couple pilot holes, so that way the safety chain loops can come through. So we just want to make sure that we've got everything out of the way up here, just like we did when we drilled downwards. We're going to have a nice clear area up here to be able to get through. Now we're going to take a smaller drill bit. We're going to be looking for the holes where the safety chain loops are going to be going through, and just to get an idea of where specifically we're going to be coming up through the bed, what I'm going to do is take that pilot bit and run it dead center in these holes, so that way we can find that better spot and clean it up top. So now we're going to start working our way up in bit size just to enlarge that hole big enough to get these U-bolts through. We're going to use the pilot holes that we drilled from below and come from the top this time. Once you got the holes drilled, you'll be able to take the bolt and drop it through, and we'll head back underneath. Just get both of them in place. Now on the U-bolts from underneath, we're going to be applying a spring on each side and then using the provided lock nuts that are going to come with that. There is a marking on the head of the lock nut that's got kind of the direction we'd like to be going, so that way it will pinch down the proper way. So just slide your spring over it and follow that up with the nut. We're just going to go hand tight until we can get back in there with a wrench to snug them all down. So one note before we tighten all these down is that you are going to want to just have a couple threads poking out of the bottom. We're not trying to over ratchet these by any means or take up the full amount of thread, because that would put too much pressure on that spring, and we want to still be able to pull those up so that way we've got plenty of room for our safety chain. And using a 19mm socket, we'll come back through and just snug all these down until we see those threads poking out the bottom. We're looking for is just about like that, so we'll repeat that process with the rest on this side and then hop over to the driver's side and do the exact same thing. Now we're going to be putting the handle on, run that out towards the driver's side wheel well, pushing that outwards. We're going to have to angle that loop so that it goes through the frame of the hitch. And we can drop that down. So we're going to make sure the handle's oriented towards the rear of the vehicle. And then we'll take our carriage bolt, run that through the locking plate on the hitch. Take our loop from the handle, run that through the bolt, and then put our flange nut on the back side. Now we're going to apply pressure to the carriage bolt and use a 13mm socket to tighten that up. Now with all of that tightened down for the handle, we can come back to our driver's side wheel well where that handle is going to be living. I just shoved a straight razor along the edge, top edge of the handle, so I just took that razor and cut all that out. So that way we've got access to be able to lock or unlock the hitch as needed. And now with that handle in place and our hole cut in the wheel well liner, we're just going to button everything back up, get our exhaust back in place, the ABS bracket that we've got on the left for the braking system in those lines, and then that center console that's right above the hitch itself. So we need to make sure all that's buttoned up. And then those little inserts that we talked about earlier that came out of the wheel wells, just shove those back into place with everything squared away on the hitch. They just slide right back in. And with our exhaust back in place and everything else buttoned up hardware-wise, that's going to do for our install and look at of the B&W Underbed Gooseneck hitch on our 2024 GMC Sierra. My name's Ian with eTrailer, and I appreciate you watching.